speaking with Rich Desrosiers, the CCO of the Pro Football Hall of Fame. And Rich, I want to start with this question. Everybody knows the end result. Everybody knows the final selection process of the Hall of Fame itself. And we also, most people know that the 5-year wait rule. But can you talk us through how the entire process kicks off and where the beginning of the start date conversation begins, and walk us through the parts that we don't see?
I sure can, and I appreciate the opportunity to do so. And I think it would probably surprise people to know that it's nearly a year-long process. So on Thursday night of last week, we announced the class of 2022, and we've already begun the process of selecting the class of 2023. And where we start is to just look at who's eligible to make sure that that 5-year waiting period has been adhered to, and nobody who announced a retirement 5 years ago decided to come back and unretire for any period of time, and that the folks originally on the list still are on that first-year eligible list for the class of 2023. So we start there. And that list this year, I just saw it briefly. There's probably 40 or 50 names on there of players who retired, at the end of the 2017 season and are now first-year eligibles. Then we go through the list of players who reached a certain stage last year. If they reach the finalist or semifinalist stage, they're automatically put back on the list for reconsideration. And then we open up the nominations process, and anyone can nominate someone to be in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. It doesn't have to be a media person. It doesn't have to be someone associated with the team. It could be any fan. It could be you, me, somebody's spouse. All they have to do is formally say, I recommend that, that Charlie Krause be named as a candidate for the class of 2023 at the Pro Football Hall of Fame. And that working list will take shape over the next couple of months, and then we'll send it out to our 49 selectors, and they'll peruse that list, and they'll begin a cut-down process. And the next thing that we'll do is just, double, triple, and quadruple check and make sure that there's nobody on the list who isn't eligible. And then that list will get cut down to about 120, 125 names of those who are truly eligible and really that played more than just a handful of games. It's not an exhaustive list of anybody who played and retired. It really needs to be somebody who has at least a sufficient amount of statistics and longevity to be a legitimate in the conversation for the Pro Football Hall of Fame. And over the course of the summer, there'll be some more consideration, and at various points throughout the year, there'll be some cut downs. It'll be a cut down to 25 in September, and then a cut down to 15 in November, and then we're right back into selecting the next class.
You mentioned the word automatically qualify, and that's actually a trigger word that I picked up on. That actually, one of this year's members is Dick Vermeil. And I've always had this theory, and I don't know if this is going to turn into a question or a statement, I'll let you respond, that coaches that win the Super Bowl, I don't want to say automatically qualify for the Hall of Fame, but there should be some type of fast forward to the finish line process. And so with that in mind, and possibly throw in GMs as well, is there a process to evaluate someone like coach versus player? Because that's almost an apples to oranges. How do you guys separate the two?
Great question. Let me sort of answer the last part first. There's no fast forwarding to the finish line. Everybody goes through that same exhaustive process. Narrow down what you're describing. We have a separate category for coaches and also a separate category for contributors. And folks like general managers, owners, would fall into that contributor category. And, this past year with this class of 22, it was NFL longtime supervisor of officials, Art McNally, who devoted over 50 years to the league, who was named as the contributor for the class of 2022. So we don't get into those apples and oranges comparisons as much as had been the past with the Hall of Fame. You're looking at coaches like Dick Vermeil versus coaches like, in previous, the previous year Tom Flores went in. Well, Tom Flores' resume was debated alongside Coach Vermeil's, and some others who are waiting in the wings are Mike Holmgren, who has a Super Bowl on his resume, and Buddy Parker from the Lions in the 50s, who has 2 NFL championships on his resume. With Marty Schottenheimer, doesn't have the postseason record of some of the other coaches, but has over 200 wins, which, some people would say, well, that should make him an automatic. Winning the Super Bowl should make you automatic. I think others would think, well, you win 200 games as a pro football coach. That's a lot of success, and maybe you should be automatic there. But, there is no automatic. There's nothing in our bylaws that say if you're an all-pro a certain number of years or win a Super Bowl or win 200 games that you're an automatic Hall of Famer. It takes the vote of the 49 selectors.
Let's switch directions real quick, and let's talk about the physical building, the hall itself. And go with me on this metaphor, and I don't know if this is the right work or not. But when you go to Disney World, you've experienced Disney World once, but what brings you back to Disney World, besides Mickey Mouse, is they reinvent themselves every so often. So even though you stayed at that hotel or ate at that restaurant, it's now new foods in the menu. It's a new experience of the ride. The hall itself, does it reinvent itself, or does it just keep expanding and growing? How would you answer that?
Well, certainly the Hall of Fame gallery where the bronze busts are on display, that the physical room doesn't grow any. There is space for the display of busts to grow. There's still space in that room to add several more years of busts. The hall itself has not had a physical expansion in several years. It has had 4 in its lifetime, growing from a very modest, roughly 20,000 square feet to about 120,000 square feet now, and it includes 2 theaters and much more space for exhibits and interactive pieces. So we are landlocked to some extent. So physically it doesn't grow. But what we do is there's a couple of galleries that have a lot of turnover in them. What we call the Pro Football Today Gallery illustrates the history being made over the course of the current season, or perhaps 1 to 2 seasons ago, and it's a very popular section of the museum because even the most casual fan will recognize the names of the players whose artifacts are collected in there. Things from Tom Brady, things from Aaron Rodgers, things from Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase and Aaron Donald and all of the big stars of the league. Things that they're doing to set records or become notable. When Justin Tucker kicked the 66-yard field goal early this season, we collected his uniform, including his shoes, and those are on display and things like that. So, from that standpoint, it's fresh every year with some of the new artifacts. And then there's other things that we managed to obtain over the course of the year that...
Let me end with this, and I got one final question for you. I want you to take off your CCO hat real quick and put just your normal sports fan cap on and just allowing yourself... Everybody knows the bust room, and you've briefly described some other rooms. What room for you still gives you goosebumps when you walk through it?
Great question. Goosebumps for me, boy, I really enjoy looking at the display of the 56 Super Bowl rings because you can stop and find some deep, if you really, and we just did this in conjunction with the Super Bowl this year is we put out a series of videos explaining the significance of the rings and why the gems are set in the pattern that they're in, or the colors that they used, or the number that they use, the number of stones that are in the ring, and what the significance of that is. And there's probably details that we didn't even get into. They're so intricate. And you think about what goes into winning one of those, and the blood, sweat, and tears that goes into winning a Super Bowl ring, and how it signifies the excellence of for that season. and the backstory, like I said, of what the ring symbolizes, I always stop at that case and find something new to appreciate. So that one for me gets a little tingle going.
This is Rich Desrosiers, the Chief Communication Officer of the Pro Football Hall of Fame.